This is our third community workshop for the Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project. I'm Kelsey Regani with Kernton West. I see a lot of familiar names on the participant list, so hi everyone. And I'll be helping to facilitate our conversation today. First up, I wanted to share that this meeting is about to be recorded. We'll hit record at any moment, and that is so if folks aren't able to attend this meeting or need to reference the recording, it will be available on the project website. Next, I'd like to introduce Mayor Pro Tem Mary Beer and Mayor Sue Beckmeyer to provide opening remarks.
Good evening, everybody. I am so happy to be here tonight, and I'm happy that you're here tonight. And I want to welcome you to the Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project Workshop number 3. We're super happy that you're here. It's so important that our community has the opportunity to participate in all of these workshops. So I want to take a moment to thank Ryan Marquez and all of the staff and the consultants who have worked so hard to bring you all of the information and the ideas and the options for to present to you tonight. It's a ton of work, and I know that they've also been fielding a lot of questions in the past few weeks from the community as well, so I want to thank them for doing that. The damages sustained at the pier and the king tides and the weather, it all really shows us how important this project is. And it's a delicate project because we want to make sure that the area is resilient with the sea level rise, but we also want to make sure that it's maintaining its natural assets. And that's not an easy thing to do. So I'm really excited to hear all the information that's going to be presented to you tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Sue Beckmeyer.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I just want to kind of reiterate and expand a little on what Mayor Pro Tem Beer was saying. While the main goal of this project is to preserve infrastructure and make the area safer, it really also presents an opportunity to make a unique space for the enjoyment of residents and the enjoyment of visitors. The promenade is a tremendous asset for our city, and it is important for the residents. It's important for the businesses around West Sharp Park. It provides recreational opportunities, accessibility to the coast, our prized ocean views, and visitor attractions that are really essential to this neighborhood and to the economic vitality of Sharp Park. This project, like other projects in the area, major projects like our general plan update, the local coastal program update, the Sharp Park specific plan, the Beach Boulevard Park Plaza plan, and the bike and pedestrian plan, just to name a few, are essential building blocks for Pacifica and for our future. Tonight, we have an opportunity to listen to the preliminary findings from the coastal engineers, and they're going to help us understand more about the hazards to Beach Boulevard and our infrastructure, and help us consider alternatives for addressing the impact of coastal erosion and improve safety in the area to make it more resilient long into the future. Your input is important. I'm really glad you're here. It's important to ensure the vision of this project is consistent with the needs of the residents and the users of the area. And we're really glad that you're here to listen and share. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right, I'd like to walk through a bit more information about what to expect from tonight's workshop and how to participate. So I'll try to move through these pretty swiftly, but I will repeat some things throughout the workshop. So if you missed anything or I'm going too fast, I will repeat myself. So starting first with the meeting objectives, they are to provide a project overview and update since the last community workshop in December. Provide a summary of key findings from the multi-hazard risk assessment, and that was really the focus of our last workshop. Share information on each alternative under consideration and the criteria that will be used to identify the preferred alternative. And lastly, continue past workshop conversations and collect participant input on public space opportunities, as well as the criteria related to the alternatives under consideration. So our agenda for tonight is really in kind of four main category buckets, so to speak. We'll start with the project overview with a brief overview, and then we'll move into a discussion of the range of alternatives. And that's where we'll also discuss the findings of the multi-hazard risk assessment. And then we'll discuss the public space opportunities, particularly on the North Promenade and for the Southern Park. And then we'll wrap up with public comment at the end of the meeting. Two more things to note on the agenda. You see that there are 3 sessions for Q&A. So we will be pausing throughout the presentation to take some questions. And then you'll also see that there's kind of a window at the end of when the meeting will adjourn. It will adjourn after everyone who wishes to provide their 2 minutes of public comment has the opportunity to do so. So ways to participate tonight. Oh, ground rules first. We ask that you honor the agenda, participate actively and respectfully, work to understand each other's perspectives, focus comments and speak concisely, speak in order. The facilitator will mind the cue. And we like to share ground rules and encourage us all to work together to have a productive, efficient meeting. Okay, so now how to participate. So during the Q&A sessions, if you would like to speak and share your question, you can raise your hand, and there should be an option to raise your hand if you kind of hover at the bottom of your screen. And that will kind of make the cue for us. And when it's your turn to ask the question, we'll unmute your line and then remute you after the question. If you would rather type in your question and not have it read aloud, you can submit a question in the Q&A pod. So similarly, you'll hover at the bottom and you'll see the Q&A pod. You're encouraged to write in questions at any point during the presentation. A couple things to note there is that we will take questions from those who have their hands raised first, and then time permitting, take some questions from the Q&A pod. Questions that we aren't able to get to from the Q&A pod will be captured in the workshop summary. And lastly, sometimes the project team will be monitoring the Q&A pod throughout the presentation. So sometimes they will respond to your questions. So feel free to monitor the Q&A pod throughout the meeting. So how to participate in public comment. So this is similar. You'll raise your hand and that will establish our queue. I'll give heads up as your time is getting closer, and then we'll unmute your line. We'll have a little 2-minute timer up, and we'll also be taking notes to make sure we're actually accurately capturing your comments, and then we'll remute you after the 2 minutes. One thing to note, and I'm not seeing it on here yet, but if folks join, or if you somehow get disconnected and you just join over the phone, you'll dial *9, and that'll raise your little icon hand for us, and we'll make sure to add you to the queue. Okay, a few more things, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan. Next is the worksheet. It's a worksheet / post-meeting survey. And it really is however you'd like to use it, you are encouraged to use it. So if this meeting could have been in person, we might have a worksheet where you can take notes throughout the meeting, and then you would attend, or then you would submit it at the end of the meeting. Feel free to do that and take notes and answer questions included in the worksheet. If you would rather have a little bit more time and digest everything from today and submit it afterwards, please feel free to do that as well. The worksheet will be available up on the website up to 2 weeks from today on February 18th. Lastly, if you're not sure how you would use it, but you want to make sure we have your contact information so we can stay in touch about the project, you can just go in and share your name and contact information and hit submit. So however it's easy for you to utilize today, you are encouraged to do so. Christian just put a link in the chat, and it also is available on the project website. Okay, two other quick things. I'm almost done. The Christian, I just mentioned Christian. He is available for tech support. So if you are running into any issues, his information is in the chat. Also, as a little note, Ryan circulated a kind of day of reminder today email. So if you somehow get disconnected from the Zoom meeting, Christian's information is in that email as well. Final thing, if you've participated in our last two workshops, you've seen that we've used a couple polls throughout, and they are meant to be to collect initial kind of top of mind input. They are anonymous, and they are not the one opportunity to provide input on these topics. So I wanted to give that disclaimer and heads up front. Okay. No, again, that was a lot. I'll repeat some of that as we get to the Q&A and public comment. I think next I'll be turning it over to Ryan Marquez to provide the project overview.
Thanks, Kelsey. Appreciate it. Again, my name is Ryan Marquez. I work with the City of Pacifica Public Works, the engineering division. So in the interest of getting to the meat of our presentation this evening and understanding that a lot of you folks have been on previous calls and have seen this overview before, I'm going to kind of push through it quickly, but we will have a Q&A in case there are any questions on it. So just as a quick reminder, the project area is located in West Sharp Park neighborhood. During this phase of work, we are assessing the full stretch of infrastructure along Beach Boulevard. That includes the northern terminus of the north wall stretching south all the way to the Beach Boulevard, the Sharp Park berm next to the golf course. Along that span, there's four reaches, as we call them: the north wall, the pier wall system, which is on the pier abutment near the Chit Chat Cafe, and the south wall, which is south of the pier, and an area that we call the South Gap or the Clarenton Gap, which is an area without current protection, which is south of the south wall, in between the south wall and the Sharp Park berm. So just as a quick reminder on the project goals, they are to replace the current seawall and outdated infrastructure, to build resilience into one of the most vulnerable segments of the city's shoreline, to improve public access and the use of Beach Boulevard and the promenade, and really ultimately to create a multi-benefit solution to protect public infrastructure, recreational activities, homes, businesses, and the community at large from further coastal erosion impacts. So just as a quick reminder of how this phase of the project is broken down. Just as a reminder, we are in the preliminary planning and feasibility phase, where the goal is to identify a preferred alternative for this project. It's really broken down into three main tasks that the team has been working on, starting with reviewing the existing conditions of the site, and then looking at the hazards, so the future conditions of the site, and then using both of those to inform an alternative analysis where a variety of different treatments for the area could be utilized. We have had two workshops, of course, and this is workshop number 3. And we plan to have another final workshop to present the preferred alternative to the public. All the while, we've been trying to continue engaging the community through online surveying as well as information sharing. So just to recap on some of the key discussions from our past workshops, what we've heard from the public. We've heard about concerns on funding this project and the cost to Pacificans, and that's something that's definitely on the project team's mind. We've heard the need to align the city's planning efforts with this project, as well as with regulatory agencies' requirements, and we've been continually doing that. We've also heard that this project will serve as a catalyst for commercial development and private investments in Pacifica. We've heard concerns around the construction timeline for this project and whether phasing is a possibility and to look at priority areas and prioritize patching up different areas along Beach Boulevard. We've also heard how this project, or concerned how this project is evaluating recreation, and we've heard that the public would like more details on the economic impact, costs and amenities associated with each project alternative, long-term and large scenario planning, and as well as some real-world examples of project alternatives. And I think a lot of those will come with the release of the multi-hazard risk assessment. So I believe with that, I'd like to open it up for our first Q&A session on any questions regarding to the process of this project. So.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. So at this point, we do have a couple minutes for questions. If you have any clarifying questions on the project overview, you can raise your hand and we'll establish our queue. We did get a couple of questions in that I just wanted to note that were answered. How many people are on tonight's call? Good question. We have 49 for now, and I'll try to remember and give updates so you have a sense of how many other folks are joining you on tonight's call. And then there was a question if there are summaries of each of the past workshops. Yes, they are available on the project website. And then there was a question about getting a response to the post-meeting survey. So we can follow up with that person afterwards. I don't know if there might be an option in there. Feel free to indicate when you're completing it that you'd like a response. Okay, and I see John Mukulin has a question. I'm gonna unmute you, John. Let's see, 1 second.
Hello, Kelsey, can you hear me?
Hi, I can.
Great, thanks. I just had a question regarding kind of the stated project objectives that Ryan had outlined initially there. And I'm just curious as to kind of how those objectives were determined and, you know, why the objective of the project isn't long-term climate resiliency at the lowest possible cost, which seems to me the purpose and need here.
Yeah, thanks for the question, John. So those objectives and goals were formulated through city staff and through the project team. As far as your comment regarding building resilience at the lowest possible cost, sometimes that's not the intent of projects, and sometimes that's not the sole purpose of them. And there's other objectives that we want to make sure that we're responding to throughout the project, just not solely looking into the cheapest way of doing it.
Great, thanks Ryan and thanks John. Alan, I'm not sure if you had your hand up and I preemptively lowered your hand, so I'm gonna unmute you in case you did have a comment, just in case. Did you have a comment, Alan? Let's see. Or a question? Okay.
No comment.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Don't want to go too fast here. Okay. All right. There is a question in the Q&A pod of is managed retreat still on the table in this discussion?
So just to answer that, the team hasn't taken any option off the table, and we're going to be looking at all the options to satisfy environmental review and any regulatory agency questions with regards to that.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, final question we're going to take. Tom Thompson has his hand raised. So let me unmute you, Tom. Okay.
Okay, I was just asking I just want to know, is there going to be time later on for public comment?
Yes, there is time at the end after we move through the presentation for public comment. Great, thanks. Okay. I think we're ready to move into the range of alternatives. So I think I'm first turning it over to Paul Henderson with GHD.
Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, I'm Paul Henderson. I'm a civil engineer with GHD and the project manager from the consultant side for this project. Hopefully most of you were able to attend the previous public workshops where we ran through the multi-hazard risk assessment, or the MHRA as we call it. But because that was 2 months ago, I'll provide a refresh on the MHRA before we move into the new design alternative material. So the MHRA, essentially, after working through the existing conditions review, completing field investigations, geotechnical analysis, wave modelling, and general observations of the site and some of the bad conditions we've seen, we've determined the hazards at the site, and those main hazards are coastal flooding, coastal erosion, and earthquakes. And there's probably no surprises there. But I will give you a quick description of each of these hazards. So coastal flooding is generally from the wave overtopping, which we've seen a lot of in the recent months. Our modelling found that during a 60-year event, which is roughly equivalent to the 1983 El Nino storm, the total water levels are significantly higher than the seawall crests, which creates a wave flood hazard zone that could extend up to 200 feet landward on the north wall or behind the north wall, and 75 feet landward in the south wall. And coastal erosion is generally caused by wave action, and we obviously have the examples on the bluffs to the north, where many properties have been removed over the years and the bluffs are clearly moving inland. Right now at Beach Boulevard, we do have the seawall and a rock revetment, which is stopping coastal erosion from progressing. We also have the scour, which is essentially coastal erosion, but in the downward direction rather than in the inland direction. And in front of the existing wall, we have the rock revetment, which is protecting us against scour at the moment. And on top of these coastal hazards, we obviously have sea level rise to contend with, which is going to increase the magnitude of these existing coastal hazards. And we also have the earthquake hazard, of course. Pacifica is located in close proximity to the San Gregorio and San Andreas faults. The earthquake hazards specifically are physical ground movement or shaking, ground surface rupture, and soil liquefaction. And so if we can go to the next slide. So those were the hazards. So that's the H part of the MHRA. So we also analysed the risks of these hazards, which is the R part of the MHRA. So one of the methods we used to analyse the risks was to run a hypothetical scenario. And that scenario is thinking about what would happen if the current shoreline protection was not repaired or maintained from this point forward. And we call this our no project or no action alternative. And what we found in this risk assessment was that if the Beach Boulevard shoreline is unprotected, we can expect the complete loss of Beach Boulevard by 2030, the loss of approximately 50 buildings by 2050, and the loss of more than 160 buildings by 2100. We will also lose utilities and other infrastructure, which will require relocations, and of significance is the complete relocation of the sewer mains and pump station from Beach Boulevard to Palmetto. That would be a new pump station. There would need to be street reconfigurations and a number of other critical utility relocations. And if the shoreline is not protected, we need to consider the pier also. Is the pier removed, or do we extend the pier landward as the shoreline moves landward? Ultimately, in our hypothetical scenario, we chose to analyse the removal of the pier sometime after 2030 because access from the shoreline would be gone, which obviously has significant costs both financially and socially if we were to remove the pier. In terms of the earthquake risk or the risk of seismic events, this will always be present whether the shoreline is protected or not. However, we do take this into account when we're analysing possible new shoreline structures like the structural engineering of the wall foundations or slope stability for rock revetments, that sort of thing. And the chance of an earthquake happening, it's been predicted there's a 72% chance of a major earthquake occurring over the next 30 years, and large is considered magnitude 6.8 or greater. Obviously, there are public safety issues associated with the failing infrastructure and failing bluffs. And also of concern with a 2-foot sea level rise scenario, we can expect far greater overtopping water volumes. An example of this is in an event similar to the recent 2016 storm overtopping, we would expect to see double the volume of overtopping due to sea level rise. And that volume would obviously easily wash people off their feet, which is a significant safety issue. And with the loss of shoreline protection and the Beach Boulevard corridor, we would lose much of the recreation space that's currently enjoyed by Pacificans and visitors, including potentially the loss of the pier. Environmentally speaking, because the general vicinity of the project is already developed space, the loss of shoreline protection would have a small effect on the environment, generally speaking, but potentially having a significant impact on the Laguna Salada wetland within the golf course to the south. This would be due to saltwater intrusion if the Beach Boulevard shoreline protection is lost. So in the MHRA, we also analysed high-level economics for the no-action scenario. We used the NOAA framework, which we're using to analyse the feasibility of the various project alternatives that Gillian will be talking about soon. This analysis allows for both monetised impacts and the intangible or non-monetised impacts for the environmental, social and recreational impacts. At the high level, we found that in today's dollars, a no-action scenario could have cost well over $200 million in monetised impacts, and that includes costs due to infrastructure repair, cleanup, demolition, utility relocations, and of course lost property and business interruption costs. And some of the non-monetised impacts that we looked at or are looking at are anxiety and discomfort to people, loss of recreation, and impacts to the Laguna Salada wetland, as I mentioned before. So next steps, in terms of the economics, what we've determined in the MHRA analysis is the benefit of the project alternatives. So we've found out what impacts the project will mitigate, both financial and non-financial. And now in the alternatives analysis, we'll determine the costs of the project and how much each of those will cost to build and maintain a shoreline protection, whether it's a structure or otherwise. And, will it increase the recreation space? Will it improve the other social and environmental aspects? We'll be running a benefit cost analysis on each of the alternatives, and that'll be used as one of the tools to compare the alternatives against each other in our formulation. But I don't want to encroach on Gillian's presentation, so I'll hand you over to her to present the design alternatives and how we will assess them. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Everyone can hear me okay? Waiting for Kelsey to nod her head. Excellent. Hi, I'm Gillian Miller. I'm a maritime and coastal engineer, and I'm going to be taking us through these next few slides, really talking about how we bracketed the alternatives, including no project, which of course Paul has just taken us through so well. What I want to emphasize really is that we're not considering these options in isolation or in a vacuum. They are interactive, and there are elements of one that may come into the other. For example, we've got beach nourishment there and sand retention structures. There are options, and as we look at these, we can consider all the different ways in which nature-based solutions and living shoreline concepts can be incorporated into these broad categories. So we are breaking them down, as you see there, but I want to emphasize that they're not in isolation, and we don't just see one as a definitive, that's what it is. Coastal defense for Pacifica, it's all about risk management, right? And it's about evaluating the feasibility of those alternatives. Next slide, please. Cool. Okay, so before we dive into those, I really want to note on the evaluation and selection criteria. What matters? It's set for technical performance, which that's it for people like myself, engineers. That's where we feel most comfortable. But there's of course other selection criteria that are just as important. Number one there, of course, is cost. Matters, right? It's not, it is a consideration. It really does matter, not just the capital cost of installation, but that whole of life cost, what it costs to maintain, what it costs to keep coming back to. That's very important. It's important for the planning, the feasibility, and I'm sure it's very important to you all. Safety, right? Safety is something that we all take very seriously. I think, especially these days, in the strange world that we're living in. And that's everything from pedestrian safety, vehicles, that you still feel safe to access your public spaces and your frontage. Environmental resource protection. It's a shared space, right? Our coastlines are shared spaces that we have to respect and consider. We consider our environment in everything that we do, and it is an element that we have to take very seriously. As we look there to 4 and 5, which public access, recreational value, the culture of the frontage. These are things that do matter. How you use the frontage, what's important. This is an element that we think about it. And the last two there, really are tied in together with that reliability and resilience, resilience to climate change, adaptability to future challenges. I was mentioned before on one of the questions there, long-term climate resiliency at lowest cost. I think that really is what those 2 bullet points are. Reliability and resilience. How do we look not just to tomorrow, but to years to come, and what that looks like, and how this project will react and adapt to that. Right. Next slide, please.
So I think, Jillian, this might be time for our first poll question.
Super.
So I'll tee it up, and I know this is a lot of information to digest. So I'll remind that the poll question is meant to get your initial feedback on what Jillian just reviewed. And so if the poll question can come up now, we'll keep this slide up. The question is, which of these alternative selection criteria are of most importance to you? Which are speaking to you the most after just hearing the definitions and overview from Jillian? And if you could choose up to 3. So we'll give a moment to collect some responses. High level feedback. I know it's a quick test here. Okay, I'll give just 15 more seconds, and then we'll end the poll and show you the results. Okay, final call. Okay, I think we can end the poll and maybe show the results here. What we're seeing is a little bit of a spread throughout, with resilience to sea level rise coming in with the most at 79%. The next is environmental resource protection, and I saw that one got the first vote. It went right over all the way in blue, and then kind of a mix between life cycle costs, safety, public access and recreation, and preservation of coastal views and community character. Thank you so much, everyone, for the quick input on that. Okay, Jillian, keep going.
No worries. We'll slide on to the next one. Okay, back to maybe where I'm more comfortable on the technical side of thing with design criteria. And design criteria is that definition of common goals and technical performance requirements. Really about on the technical side. Most importantly, a consistent criteria that we can use to evaluate all of the alternatives. Right, and I've got it down the bottom there because I want to emphasize that, a non-biased technical criteria. That performance criteria, things like design life, how long does this have to last? What kind of protection are we talking about? What are the maintenance and the operation expectations? You don't build infrastructure on the coastline and just walk away. We're always in delaying and moving forward. It's never stays stagnant. So these are very important, the design criteria, and it allows us to compare those apples to apples. A beach nourishment scheme to a wall. It's very important that we have that consistent criteria. So next slide, please. Okay. First alternative, no project. You know, I think Paul took us through very well, very concisely what no project looks like, right? I don't think we're speculating these days. You know, there's no mystery to what might happen to Beach Boulevard if there is no project. You know, I think this winter has shown, amongst other events, what that really looks like. So, looking forward, I think we can move straight off that slide and on to the next one. Okay, on to alternatives, starting with beach nourishment. And you know, this is it's a softer solution on the spectrum, and it really involves building out a beach through placement of material. I put on the slide there sand, but that material can be everything from shingle, which is like a gravel, all the way through to cobble. You're probably using words that are more British than anything else, but you get the idea. It's the difference in the size from very large material through to small material. From the technical side of things, that has a lot to do with how it feels, and it has a lot to do with where it goes. The finer the sand, the quicker it moves off your beaches. Undoubtedly, you know, the biggest pro of a beach nourishment scheme is beach access and recreation. And I think that is the vision of California, that we have these nice wide sandy beaches. You can walk your dog, you can access it with your family. There is no doubt that that is the biggest pro, I believe, for beach nourishment. Some of the disadvantages, some of those cons are unfortunately more on the reliability side of things. Of course, it's very susceptible to erosion, particularly for places like Pacifica, where we have a very aggressive wave climate. There's very large volumes of sand needed. There is uncertainty in where this sand comes from, particularly looking forward into the future. You know, I think that poll was fantastic. It said, you know, adaptability to climate change and resiliency. That's sometimes where beach nourishment is a little bit of an uncertain one. Where might that material come from in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? And that also can, of course, lead to cost. So there is a very high risk of escalation of cost over the design life, especially when you're looking at a very high maintenance option where you know you're going to have to come back and maintain this. And just the last one on the note there is, even with a beach nourishment scheme, we would still require to maintain that functionality and the flood protection at the back of the beach. That would still require repairs or replacement of the seawall elements, so that we are creating that separation and that useful side from the promenade. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are our renderings. That's really kind of showing you what it might look like. Just to emphasize the wave climate we're looking at. Of course, that's a nice day, right? It's sunny, we're enjoying the sand, we're looking down from the promenade. But of course, you can immediately feel the value of a beach nourishment scheme. I don't think that's lost on anyone. But it's what that looks like on a very stormy day. What about the storms that are coming in the future? So I think that's one that we have to keep in mind with beach nourishment. So on to the next slide, please. Okay, our third alternative here is sand retention structures. And as I touched on that first slide when we had the four together, this is one that we look in where it's more in combination. So effectively, a sand retention structure is just something that then helps to slow the loss of that beach material over time. That can be everything from shore perpendicular groins, that's a rock groin that you're looking at there on the screen. It can be offshore reefs. It can be shore-connected headlands. There's a lot of different ways in which sand retention structures can be incorporated. And just to say, we are thinking along all of those lines. It's not just groins on the beach and that's the end of it. On the pros side of there, I also put that second bullet point. They can potentially reduce some of the force in the wave climates. The word I wanted to use was attenuate, but I've been told that that's not a common usage word. So we're going with slowing the force. It's a bit of a caveated option there, which is sometimes on aggressive coastlines like we have here, by putting structures in the water, you can actually create some different currents and eddy situations that can sometimes be a dangerous or undesirable situation. So that pro, I'm going to kind of sit a little bit in between the pros and cons. That would be very much as we move forward with the technical analysis and the modelling, should we proceed with this option. So some of the disadvantages there, as we just mentioned, it has to be combined with beach nourishment. You have to have sand to actually retain, which of course touches back to cost. So here we're looking at beach nourishment plus sand retention structures. How that cost benefit works out, if you can retain more, if you don't lose as much, then you don't need as much sand, but of course you have then the additional cost of the retention structure itself. We touch on reliability there with the beach nourishment. It's very similar. So even though you are potentially having more protection or you're able to keep more material there, there is a reliability issue. That superstorm, that very large event could come in and can actually strip down and denude your beach. There are always sometimes public safety concerns. I've seen this a lot in the past where there are structures on the beach that haven't been there before. I know that there's, of course, the rock revetment that you guys are familiar with, but sometimes on the public safety, whether it's the currents or whether it's just having large armor stone or something similar on the beach can be a concern. And then that last bullet point, same as the previous slide, you still require that seawall or repairs to our frontage to maintain that functionality. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is, again, one of our renderings, and I think what this shows is a good representation of what occurs typically on a beach with a sand retention structure. So, of course, we have the groin here, and what you're seeing is a retention of sand on the up drift side, and then the beach cut back on the down drift side. That's typical, that's what we expect. In the design process, what we look at is the shape that it forms, and we predict the spacing that is needed, the crest height of the groin, and then the length as well, that then has an effect on that shoreline shape. But it is, again, something to think about when we're looking at our options. You need to make sure that doesn't cut back too far and you get a pinch point on your beach. So this all goes into the technical feasibility side of things. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, number 4 here is replacing the seawall. I think that number 1 there, I've tried to focus very much on the technical pros and cons, but I think one of the considerations that we shouldn't lose with this particular promenade or this particular area is that character of Pacifica, and also the use of it. The ability with the road, the connections, the ability to promenade and to access your frontage it's part of Pacifica and could be very important. One of probably the primary advantage to a wall is really on that reliability. When designed correctly and installed correctly for this frontage, for this wave climate, and for these geotechnical conditions, a seawall can be incredibly reliable. It can also be adaptable to future increases, whether that's increases in crest height or whether it can be resilient to loss of material at the toe. It can be all designed in as part of the original function. Low maintenance is a third bullet there, which compared to beach nourishment or similar, it is a very low maintenance option. Of course, all structures and all assets have to be maintained. That's very important. But they don't need whole replacement as long as small things that occur, maybe small areas where there's damage, are maintained and repaired. A seawall can have a very long life with a low maintenance. Another advantage noticed there is the maintenance or even the reduction in the existing footprint. Of course, they are vertical structures as opposed to horizontal structures. So you can end up with a lot of protection in a very small footprint without losing anything either on your beachfront side or on your roadside and on your land use side. Some of the cons, they are, of course, more visually engineered. It's a wall. And of course, there's lots you can do on the cladding, on the incorporation, particularly on the behind the wall element, when we can look a lot at the environmental promotion, habitat enhancement. There's a lot that can be done behind the wall in terms of making that connection through to the seafront, making this useful space, green space, enticing space. So although it's a very engineered feel, it is a wall, there's a lot of opportunities behind the wall. And the last bullet there, I put down requires specialized construction. Really, to explain that a little better is this is a marine environment. It is a aggressive marine environment, and construction of these types of walls do require a very experienced contractor in this type of construction. So that puts some limitations on it. It does mean that you are looking to a pool of marine contractors as opposed to some of the more simplistic options. But it should be viewed in the holistic side of things. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, on our rendering side, I think that really gives you the feel. It's probably not dissimilar to how Pacifica has felt in the past, maybe with some of the less vulnerable situations. You have the connection to the water, you're able to see out, you're able to access your frontage. And as we progress through these slides and get onto some of the later ones, looking at what that might look like on the land side of things, looking out over the water. Okay, we'll move on, please. Brilliant. So rock revetment, which is the last of our broad brush alternatives that we're talking about. One of the primary pro that you see up there on the screen is it's a low-tech option, relatively simplistic construction. Although I will say, as an engineer, it is very important, again, to have somebody, a contractor building who's very familiar with this. The types of rocks and the size of rocks that we are talking about are very, very large, and these have to be placed appropriately and correctly. With the rock revetment side, of course, it's very adaptable. It can be increased. It can be added to over time. As you lose material, it can be added to as you get rising sea levels. It is low maintenance, the least of all the options, even including the wall. I think that should say wall, not well, but okay, you can follow along. When constructed correctly and designed correctly, designed for future scenarios as well, not just for today, rock revetments can be incredibly low maintenance. Some of the cons, very much on the technical side. I know there are other cons as we looked at in that earlier slide. It is a permeable option, right? Water moves through the rocks, particularly these large armor rocks. So it does require a work on the wall behind the crest to alleviate flooding. And that is typically a seawall, not dissimilar to what Pacifica has at the moment. So there is, of course, from a cost aspect, you do require the wall anyway, but with the rock armor in front of it. It is a trapezoidal shape, which for those who don't have kids doing high school mathematics, what it means as you come up with height, you of course increase in your footprint as well. So it can take up a lot of your land, whether that is your beachfront that you are losing from your amenity value, or whether it's on the environmental side. As you go higher, you also go bigger. So environmental resource promotion, as we talked about, similar to the seawall, there are opportunities, of course, behind the wall to bring that green space aspect in, but not a lot on the beach side, on that side. And the last one there is aesthetics. I think if we slide on to the next slide, we'll see the rendering. You know, I think that's one of those things that's noted a lot with revetments. Not everybody loves rocks. I'm a geeky engineer, that's okay. But it is a very imposing view, and it does create, you know, a very physical barrier between the frontage and the waterfront and your access side of things. So there is an element there that that could be a less desirable look on that side. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Now we come back full circle, back to this concept or this idea of composites, that we are, although I've broad brush described these different alternatives, they are not in isolation, right? Whether we're talking beach nourishment with sand retention, whether we're talking about a seawall, you know, maybe it's a smaller seawall combined with a rock revetment. They are composites, but by breaking them down and looking at them individually, we can also look at the pros and cons of each and the technical feasibility of all of them, you know. The ability to bring in those nature-based solutions, you know, looking at climate change resiliency, that matters in each one of these in a slightly different way. And that's why we want to make sure that we're always thinking about it in terms of composites and various different options. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much.
Back.
Awesome. All right. So we are ready for our next Q&A session. But what we're also going to do is, while the questions and answer discussion is happening, we're going to bring up the next poll questions, and they'll all come up together. There's 3 questions. So that way, if you would like to have your question answered and then do the polls, or if you want to be thinking about the polls throughout the Q&A, there's a little bit more flexibility and time with these polls. So to tee them up, and given what Jillian weighed with the kind of pros and cons of each of the alternatives, and starting to think about trade-offs, and as she just wrapped up there, you know, ultimately looking at, you know, elements, and that it's not a, you know, one option only sort of idea. The poll questions are starting to get to considering some of those trade-offs. So the first question is thinking about views. Sorry, let me have my list here. Views versus level of flood protection. And then the second 2 are really on overtopping amounts and frequency. So you'll have some time up for the polls, and then we'll while we're taking the Q&A, and you can kind of move the polls around if they're in your way at all. So we're going to start with the questions with folks who have their hands raised, and there are some questions in the Q&A pod we'll try to make sure we have some time for before we move into the public space opportunities discussion. So Robin, I think you're up first. Let me unmute you here. All right, are you there? Robin, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Ooh, that was, oh my God. I got scared. So Jillian, when you were talking about beach nourishment, because I've seen some incredible beach work done in Holland. What it requires is there's a lot of beach nourishment, as you know, there's a lot of sand that goes up there, but they use dredges. And I noticed you mentioned something about not being certain about the supply of sand, but yet we have an incredible resource of sand right out in the ocean, which is what's done in Holland. And they use dredges to bring the sand up and they pump it up onto the beaches and then they kind of move it around and then, you know, they let wave action sort of place it. So I wanted to know what the deal was with that, because you didn't mention dredges. And I think dredges are, I mean, it's very successful where it's done everywhere else in the world. The other thing is the combination, because the sand is a really great natural barrier to you know, high waves, storm water overtopping, the things that we need to deal with a projected 2-foot sea level rise. But how can this be combined with a structure behind it? Because usually, I think, as you know, you just don't. I mean, the way it's done in Holland, there's actually a physical structure there, but it's sort of hidden and it's done in such a natural way that you really don't realize that there's any engineering involved there at all. And I'm hoping that's something that we can accomplish here at our beach by doing something that looks natural and is functional and it's successful at protecting everything that's behind there that we want to protect, like the homes in the neighborhood and everything. I was wondering if you could comment about that, Jillian.
Absolutely. In fact, I would love to take the opportunity to talk with you more about that if there is a chance. I've spent a lot of time working on the Sand Engine, which is the Dutch mega beach nourishment scheme. I worked with Deltaris on that one. It was quite exciting. It's a completely different concept. It requires an unprecedented amount of sand that was put there that is then used in a natural recharge. But to very much focus on Pacifica, absolutely, getting sand to the beach with the use of dredges and pumping ashore is a very normal way to do things. It has to do with where that material comes from and getting the permissions in place to then use it, which can be very complicated. There's a lot of competition. There is apparently a lot of sand available until you start to look at the effects on the downstream and the upstream, and then also on our shoreline and how to get it. We get deep quite quickly, and we also lose a lot of our material into our submarine canyons along the coast. So it's a very long answer. It's where to guarantee where that material comes from next time. If you get the permissions in place to get it for this project, do you get it again for your next 5-year or 10-year recharge? That's more where it comes into. And then on terms of how high you go, the beautiful thing about nourishment is you're pushing those waves away from where you don't want them, right? You're creating, like you say, that natural barrier. In an ideal situation, what you want to be able to do is to create a natural dune system behind it to then stabilize and move all your people. Another thing that the Dutch are terribly good at is that they already have, when they reclaimed their entire country, they actually created an entire dune system and do not build their towns and their cities and their residential areas close to the actual coastline. They build it behind the dune line. Kelsey, I'm worried about time, but I would love to maybe answer this in greater depth offline or in a written answer.
Yes, I think that would be great. I think we know Robin and can provide and can also add more detail into the summary. That might be the best alternative. I appreciate you looking at the clock because we have 3 more hands raised and still some questions in the Q&A pod. So we'll try to keep moving through these. Peter Loeb, I think you are next. Are you there, Peter?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
None of these alternatives include moving the infrastructure that's at risk. Why not? Shouldn't there be an alternative? For instance, a combined alternative that does maybe perhaps a less intense seawall. I don't know what word I'm looking for. With moving the infrastructure that's at risk here, it can't last forever. There has to be a point at which we're going to have to move it. Why can't an alternative include that? I guess is my question.
Sorry, I'm struggling with my technical, I'm pressing the wrong buttons at the same time. You're absolutely right. We are not ever stopping the sea. And I think when we say that, we're being very, very arrogant in it. We're always just delaying for any project anywhere, right? Across the whole globe. there's accretion and erosion that will continue. It's one great big cycle. But you can't solve everything tomorrow, you know, and I think there's a problem that needs to be solved immediately to allow the long-term planning of the whole of the California coastline and all over the US. So I think it's about looking at those solutions that work for that period of time while we plan for that future. There's no doubt about it. We're not going to stop the sea forever. And I think everybody is sadly aware of that, right? It is what it is.
Thanks, Jillian. Okay, next up, and I apologize if I did not pronounce your name correctly, but Chizoba. Are you there?
That's right.
Great, yes, we can hear you.
So a question I had was just around any sort of landscaping considerations to buffer and like mitigate any sort of sense of like harsh and natural walls. It doesn't seem like there has been much attention put to like what's going to do to add to the landscape. And I know it's like closer towards the beach and it's supposed to have more of a natural feel, but there are going to be any sort of like planting or parklets to give an alternative if the beach is no longer accessible?
That's a great question. I'll hop in here, and it's actually a great segue to where we're going next in our presentation. We'll touch on the promenade area, some possible plantings and planters and amenities in the area in just a few minutes. So it's a perfect segue. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Okay, 2 more questions in with hands raised, and then we'll try to tackle a couple of these from the pod and then move on. Okay, Jim and Pat Creamer are next. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I put my hand down and then put it right back up. I have a follow-up. Basically, I agree with Peter's question, but I want to take advantage of it, opportunity to say just a little bit more. You did agree that it was important to consider these other alternatives, but said that it was okay to put these off. My question is, we got a range of alternatives. One of them was a no action, and 2 of them, I must say, in my opinion, look a little bit like, I want to call them straw people, because I don't think we're going to be able to support beach nourishment or the berms or the groins. So you got basically a couple of hard alternatives of armoring. You also said it was a good idea to think about composite plans, but what's missing from all of these ideas, which to me fits the concept of resilience, is to be thinking right now about combination alternatives, composites, if you will, that include doing something to hold the seawall, but also having plans and maybe even beginning to consider real opportunities to move the infrastructure. So my question was, isn't there options that would make sense to consider right now that would make the seawall armoring that you're probably going to end up doing easier to do and less costly in the long term, because you've got this backup plan in your pocket already knowing what you're doing? Why isn't that? We consider the no alternative, but we don't consider the other extreme. That seems really useful to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response to that comment?
Yeah, sorry, I had to get my camera going. A lot of that discussion and the long-term planning is encompassed in the local coastal plan update, and just kind of is a little bit far out of the scope of the project. Our project is really focused on ensuring the safety and the vitality of this area right now. So that's what we're focused on in this project. Hopefully that kind of starts to clear up some of that.
Thanks,
Ryan. Kelsey, this is Kevin Wood, City Manager. I can add to that, and I think it's important to remember to keep this conversation in context of the overall local coastal plan. And what we're recommending in the coastal plan is, you know, an adaptive measures that as you move along you recalibrate and address the next, 30, 40 years. But we have an immediate term analysis, like Ryan said, and project to address the immediate hazards and concerns here. So it's the way, and what the Coastal Commission has said and is supportive of is this adaptive and recalibrating, measuring as you go along what needs to be done in 50, 75, 100 years from now.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, two more hands raised, and then we might need to move into our next section. So Christine, you're up next. Christine Bowles.
Hi, thank you, Kelsey.
Well, you sound a little far away, Christine.
Is that better?
Yes, perfect. I don't want to lose your question.
I appreciate Jillian's comment that the wall is really just a temporary fix and is something to buy us time. And that's what I'm still not really hearing from the city officials. I mean, we're looking at a wall that that might last 50 or 75 years. I mean, the last wall that's falling apart was designed supposedly to last 75 years. And here we are with not even, just about half of that lifespan. And we've already spent about $2 million on repairs to that wall in half of its lifespan. So I mean, I think the questions that Jim and Peter are posing are actually quite important. We need to have a long-term plan, but the long-term plan is not necessarily that long. It might be just 10 years that we need to start moving this infrastructure. And then at what point, and then that helps inform the design of the wall and how tall it needs to be based on your long-term plan. At the last presentation, we were told that the wall really needed to be 8 feet taller than it is now, which, you wouldn't be able to walk along and see over it if it was really going to address climate change for, I don't remember if it was 60, 70 years or so. So what are we looking for? What is the timeline we're looking for? And what do we need to do to protect people? I mean, I was there in January and on a section of the wall that we're not even looking at placing and replacing, and I saw waves crash over the street, knocking a grown man down who was standing on the sidewalk across the street from Beach Boulevard. It's a public danger now, and a wall 4 feet taller is not going to solve that problem. So I think we really need a clear definition of exactly what we're trying to solve. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, Remy, I think you're our last question here, and I'll use this opportunity to say, if you haven't gotten your poll responses in, please do so, and then we are going to wrap up after this so we can stay on time. I'll note that any questions submitted in the Q&A pod that we weren't able to get to in this section will be captured and responded to in the meeting summary. Okay, Remy, I think we'll take your question.
Hi, my question is really regarding cost, because you guys put out these 4 options in the no cost or no project option. So what is the cost difference between no project and all of these 5 options, or like maybe a combination option 2 and 3? So we have an idea. And when I mean cost, I'm talking about, upfront capital costs plus the maintenance costs, let's say out to 2100. Thank you.
Thanks, Remy. Response to the cost question. I know we got it. We received some of the same questions in the Q&A pod. Anything else to add on that?
Sorry, I was having some
no problem.
Having some technical difficulties there. Could you repeat the question, please?
It was on costs of each of the alternatives, and I think it was both kind of upfront costs and then maintenance costs.
So we are developing that. So those costs are being developed as we develop the alternatives including, the capital upfront cost to, actually build the structure initially, and then also the maintenance costs as we go into the future. And like Gillian said, that we have, say, the beach nourishment options that's going to have a very high maintenance costs, but we're not at the point of being able to present those costs just yet. They would be in the next meeting, but they're certainly being developed. Yes.
Thanks, Paul. All right. So thank you, everyone, for all of the great questions. Again, the ones we weren't able to get to in that segment will be summarized in the workshop summary, responded to in the workshop summary. I do want to share the poll results quickly here. And I know these are tough questions to respond to just off the top of your head. And I think some of our discussion and questions kind of talked a little bit about a few of these things, specifically overtopping being something seeing regularly right now. So the first question on kind of the views versus level of flood protection, it looks like slightly the most responses, however much it takes to prevent overtopping safety risks. So would rather have the higher the wall and kind of less views for more protection. But 2 to 4 feet was only 3% less than that. So it seems like there might be a suggestion of a balance there. 0 to 2 feet was next with 21%, and then higher of 4 to 6 feet was at 6%. The next one is what is an acceptable amount of wave overtopping of a protection structure and flooding of the promenade. So here it was moderate splashing over the wall, resulting in some ponding water on the promenade and roadway. Had the most responses, with water splashing over wall resulting in the promenade or roadway being visibly wet came in second, with the less coming in with kind of the larger amounts of overtopping, persistent flowing water in conditions similar to those just experienced in December 2021 with severe splashing. Lastly, based on your previous answer, what is an acceptable frequency of the overtopping? And the first two were really received the most votes on commonly, several times a month, versus occasionally a few times a year, very infrequently, and then rarely had 2% and 6% respectively. So thank you, everyone, for those results. Appreciate your input there. All right. Lucas, I think we're ready to turn it over to you to discuss the public space opportunities. And here's Lucas Piper with GHD.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelsey. As Kelsey mentioned, my name is Lucas Piper. I'm a landscape architect with GHD. And in this part of the presentation, I want to introduce some options regarding the use of the public space as it relates to this project. As Jillian just presented before the Q&A, the choices that are made regarding the future protection structure may lead to some reactivation options for this public space. We want to make sure that this reactivation of the public space is in line with what the public would prefer to see for the site. In this presentation, I'll be showing a few options as an initial step to begin the conversation and get you, the public, to imagine what may be possible on this site. This initial conversation will lead to future discussions on the best treatment of the public space. It is likely that the ultimate design will be a combination or hybrid of these options, and the options will be that are presented are not set in stone. It's also important to note that the combinations will be determined based on the existing site constraints, the access needs, maintenance costs, and feedback that we receive in this workshop. So please be sure to jot down questions or notes that you have as I go through the presentation to be asked for feedback at the end. So when we're defining the public space, there's really, for this exercise, the public space is defined as the area between the edge of the road and the shoreline protection structure, whatever structure is decided upon. There are two, sorry, can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So as you see on this slide, they're really identifying two zones, public space zones, the northern promenade area and then the southern park area. These are identified as zones 1 and 2. And within these zones, there are 3 sections that identified that will show how the options in both sections, and that will show options in both section and 3D views. The sections were chosen to show how the different options handle the potential change in elevational relationship between the chosen shoreline protection structure and the existing street grade. As you'll see in later slides, the elevation of Beach Boulevard drops as you go south. For the purpose of showing the proposed options, we're showing each option with a new elevated seawall as the chosen shoreline protection option. However, each of the proposed public space options could work with any of the protection alternatives except for the no alternative, or if it is pulled back away from where that wall currently is protecting. And by showing these options using the new seawall, you'll be able to see there will be an elevation difference between the top of the seawall and the existing road. It's also important to note that these sections are static and do not show all treatment solutions. For example, ramps, stairs, and all the amenities are not captured in each of the 3D views. The North Promenade, I'm going to present 3 different options: a parking access option, which allows for street level parking with promenade access ramps at select intersections and designated parking areas; an enhanced walkway option showing pedestrian optimized paved surface, allowing for greater range of amenities; and then a green corridor option, which would balance the pedestrian needs with the pedestrian walkway needs with the creation of green space planters. And then in that southern park area, we'll be reviewing the community approved Gates and Associate Plan, which some of you may be familiar with. And then we'll also be introducing a new alternative showing beach expansion as a potential alternative. It should be noted that the Gates plan, plaza plan, was originally looked at in a vacuum that only included redoing the plaza. It did not include the opportunities for enhancing the Northern Promenade public space or with the opportunity to move or redo the protection structure. By having the luxury to look at this area outside of the confines of the existing protection structure, we are given the opportunity to revisit this area and provide an alternative treatment of the space to allow for beach expansion. As we've done with the shoreline protection, we also want to engage feedback and understand that based on the feedback, we'll be able to take these options and flesh out in more detail a final concept that reflects the desired use of this space. So if we go to the next slide. So this is at section A, this is showing the existing conditions, and under the existing condition is up by Carmel Avenue. And under the existing conditions, there is a combination of parking, paved promenade, and various amenities. Currently along Beach Boulevard from Paloma to Montecito Avenue, there are approximately 7 parallel street parking spaces. The promenade width varies from approximately 13 to 21 feet, depending on parking and location along the corridor. At section A here, we're showing a 13-foot promenade, street parking, and a single travel lane. You also note that in section A of the North Promenade, we're showing the current crest elevation of the existing shoreline protection structure. And we'll be showing that same elevation in the proposed conditions as well. As we get down to the section B, we'll be showing that elevated, so what it might look like under an elevated seawall condition. So if we go to the next slide. So for this section A, for the proposed parking access, the shoreline protection structure is shown at its current, like I said, and you can see in this 3D view that under this option that the parking is giving top priority. If this option is the preferred option, alternative, it will show increased parking and access to the promenade through sidewalks and ramp connections. At this section location, this option would look very similar to what is in the current condition, unless again, if that seawall is the preferred alternative and that wall actually rises, then we'd have some elevational difference that we'd need to make up. And go to the next slide. So under the enhanced walkway as another alternative, this is really optimizing the paved surface of the pedestrian for pedestrian recreation. If this option is favored over the other options, the preferred alternative will include more paved promenade surface and parking may be relocated or potentially reduced, reducing the number of spaces at their current locations. At this section cut, this option would remove the existing street parking and allow for a much wider 21-foot paved promenade and provide more space for pedestrian level amenities. Go to the next slide. This is showing what we're calling the green corridor option, which balances planter space and pedestrian paving. Planting would be using native and coastal appropriate plants and would be using coastal strand community grasses, herbaceous plants, and small shrubs. Trees are not recommended due to the high winds expected at this location. If this option is favored over other options, the preferred alternative will allow for more planting areas. And again, similar to the enhanced walkway option, parking may be relocated or reduced. And you can see at this section location, this option would remove the existing street parking, provide a 15-foot paved promenade, and allow for buffer plantings between the road and the promenade. If we go to the next option, next slide. So now we're moving down further south. This is section B. It's near San Jose Avenue. And this is showing the existing conditions of a approximately 21-foot wide promenade, built-in seating, and a single travel lane. There's no parking currently at this location where this section was cut through. And it's also important to highlight that at this location under the current conditions, you'll see that the existing shoreline protection structure is at an elevation of 25 feet. So this is showing the existing condition of that seawall. And it's roughly 5 feet lower than the existing shoreline protection crest elevation that was shown in section A. Moving forward with the proposed options for section B, as I mentioned earlier, that shoreline protection elevation will be shown higher than what it is currently. The shoreline protection elevation will be shown to match the elevation that it is in the north, just to give you some idea of what that elevational difference between the existing roadway and the elevated promenade might look like. So if we go to the next slide. This is showing again, going through the same options here. So the parking access option at section B here is similar to the parking access up north in the effect that it is increasing parking as a primary objective. Please also notice the difference in elevation that I keep bringing up here that would need to be accommodated for. At this section location, this option would add additional street parking, allow for an 11-foot promenade, a 4-foot wide planting buffer, and a 4-foot wide sidewalk to allow for street level connections to the paved promenade walking surface that's up above by that new seawall elevation. What is not shown in this 3D perspective are ramps that would need to be provided to allow access from the lower parking to the upper promenade. And access between street elevation, upper promenade at this location is a common, would be a common need throughout all of these, through the next 3 proposed options, or next 2. So if we go to the next slide. This is looking at the enhanced walkway. And this is really focusing again on optimizing the paved pedestrian recreational surface for that promenade. At this section location, the option would allow for a 26-foot wide paved promenade. This widened promenade would allow for a multitude of pedestrian amenities, such as public art sculptures, benches, potted plants, lighting, and a host of other options. And if we go to the next slide, the green corridor option, and this again is similar to what I've already discussed, where it's balancing the planting and the paved surface. But this option, as you increase that wall height to get up to that upper promenade, you'll notice that the planting can help provide buffer space to soften that vertical wall. And it also provides balance in the planted surface with the paved promenade. Okay, if we go to the next slide, just to summarize those options that are presented here, I'd like to reiterate that each of these options are a few examples of how that public space for the North Promenade can be handled. And, as mentioned prior, the options, the preferred option could be a combination or hybrid of multiple of these options. So if we need to balance parking versus paved pedestrian surface versus planting space, and how we balance that will be influenced based off of the feedback we receive. So Kelsey, I think at this time we have a poll question where we can rank. We'd ask you to rank each of these options to see kind of where we fall on the desired use of this Northern Promenade.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for the prompter, Lucas. So our next poll question is, and we're going to leave this, the visual up. And again, you can kind of move the poll question around. But as Lucas was sharing, he's defined these three options: enhanced walkway, green corridor, and parking access, and ultimately looking at hybrids and mixes and matches a little bit. So to help inform that, help inform where the team goes from here and continuing to analyze these options, the questions are really asking general ranking or preference of these three. So similar questions for all three, based on the options provided for the Northern Promenade. Please indicate which option you most prefer. The second is second preferred, and then the last one is least preferred. And so we'll just take 15 more seconds and do this one so we can continue on with the presentation. I do see some hands up waiting for the next Q&A session. I also want to remind folks at this time, and I'll say it again a couple more times, that apologies if we're not able to get to some of the questions, especially in the Q&A pod during the Q&A time. All of those questions submitted will be captured and summarized in the meeting, or answered, responded to in the meeting summary. So again, I want to apologize and thank you for sharing those questions. They will be responded to in the summary. All right, so let's look at the...
Kelsey, I just wanted to remind folks too that we have the workshop worksheet live too as well. So be sure to take down some notes on some of these options, because we understand that choosing and ranking is not necessarily the most appropriate way to give us very descriptive feedback. And so feel free to use that worksheet to really give us detailed feedback of how you are feeling about all these options.
Great. Thank you for that reminder, Ryan. And there are some visuals in the worksheet. So and there is kind of a more open-ended question to talk through it and provide some more notes on a similar type of question looking at these three options. All right. So some initial results. A little funny. Enhanced walkway is both the preferred and the second preferred, with 54% and 57%. But the green corridor came in second in both of those, with 32% on both. And then least preferred option at this point, parking access came in with 41%. And then third was green corridor with 32, and enhanced walkway with 27%. And I hope I'm getting the percents right. I might be a little dyslexic with what I'm sharing. Thank you to Cindy for pointing that out last time. So a little mix here, seeing enhanced walkway maybe coming up as the favorable but close throughout, and the green corridor maybe coming in at that's a second preferred, and parking access in the least preferred at this point, but also wanting to acknowledge again might not be the best way to frame it, and there is the open-ended question to kind of think through it a bit more in the worksheet.
Yeah, and Kelsey, I think that's kind of expected, is because, that's kind of the problem with having these static sections, is that as you move along that corridor, there's going to be option for doing a hybrid, of these different alternatives to how to handle that space. So I'm glad to see that is the case. So thank you for everyone who voted on that. And I thank you, Ryan, for reminding about the worksheet or more detailed response, because that's really where we'll get to the meat of why things are preferred over others. So thank you. If we can go to the next slide here, we're going to move on to the what we're calling the Southern Park area and the two different alternatives that we want to address. So first, this first alternative here, the option one, many of you may already be familiar with. This is an approved plan back from August 2020. And this plan looked at redesigning the existing park and was limited to the existing constraints and boundaries of that park. This park option adopts many existing elements of the current that exists currently on site and enhances them through a redesign process. The program components for this option may include things such as seating areas, barbecue opportunities, art, sculptures, play structures, bike parking, to name just a few. The second option is the one that we're introducing here, which is less constrained by the existing conditions and reflects the potential use of the space if the preferred shoreline protection alternative allows for the movement of that protection structure. This option would increase the beach width at this location and is being provided to gauge interest in going a different route that has been currently reviewed. If we go to the next slide, so for the Southern Park area, again, this is a plan that has already been reviewed and approved through the community. And you'll see the plan and the cross-section C there shown below. The red dashed line encompassing the project is the project limit. And as you can see, the existing shoreline protection structure originally was outside the scope of this proposed alternative and was being kept in place. However, now that we have the opportunity to potentially change the character or location of that protection structure, it is in this option that may mean that the structure is raised to provide more protection to the proposed plaza. You'll see on the cross-section in the plan various amenities, including new paving, seating, barbecue areas, picnic tables, public art, concrete planters, workout and play areas, and then the kind of gray and green large areas there are dune-inspired landscape zones. So if we go to the next slide. This slide is showing the beach expansion alternative. And this is a concept that was again, developed, taking the opportunity to revisit this area and look at what can be achieved by relocating the proposed protection structure. However, this would could potentially come with additional maintenance costs, similar to the beach nourishment alternative under the shoreline protection. That sand would need to come from somewhere and then potentially need to be maintained if washed away. And so in this option, you'll see a lot less amenities as it's dominated primarily by a beach expansion. However, you'll see on the cross section in the plan a few amenities, and it's really, as mentioned before, kind of an expansion of that northern promenade if we're going with the walkway enhancement option. So these could include new paving, seating, picnic tables, and potential for art displays, potted plants, And then really it'd be focused on that beach access and the recreational opportunities provided by that expanded beach area. So if we go to the next slide here, this is the final slide summarizing the two options that I just laid out. So you can see that they're kind of on different ends of the spectrum on how to handle this public space. The preferred alternative may be a hybrid, again, of these two options. For example, the shoreline protection structure may be only pulled back halfway to allow for a balanced plaza area, and then maybe half as much of what is shown for the beach expansion option. The preferred use of the space, again, is based on the feedback we receive, among other maintenance considerations, longevity concerns, current site constraints, among other things. But similar, as we did with the North Promenade, Kelsey will be sending out a poll question here, I think soon, to gauge response on what of these two would be the preferred alternative.
Yes, great. Thanks, Lucas. Yes, we'll bring up I think this is our final poll tonight. And one question similar to the North Promenade. For the Southern Park area, please choose which option is more favorable to you out of the Plaza Park and the beach expansion. Of course, with the same notes as for the Northern Promenade, that the team is looking at potential hybrid options as well. And there is a corresponding question in the worksheet that's a bit more open-ended. But this is a way to kind of get initial thoughts. And after this, we'll move into the final Q&A session before public comment. A couple things to note. I will probably wrap up next steps before we move into public comment. So that way, if you aren't able to stay through public comment, you have heard the next steps. And so also, if you have a question on the public space opportunities in particular, we're about to move into that Q&A. So feel free to raise your hand or share the question in the Q&A pod. Okay, final call for the poll. We'll give just a few more seconds. All right, we'll end that and share the results. So looking pretty close. For the Southern Park area, please choose which option is more favorable to you. Plaza Park comes in with 59% of the vote, and that's 62. I'm telling you, my numbers are mixed up today. My apologies. So the Plaza Park comes in with 59% of the votes, and 26 of the attendees picked that one. And beach expansion has 41% with 18 votes. So a mix, with Plaza Park coming in slightly more. Great. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. All right, I think we'll move into the Q&A now. And Robin, I see that your hand is up first. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Lucas, back when we were talking about the walkways, one thing I wanted to mention, about the green corridor option, it's something that we've been trying to do for many years in this area. We find that we have a really tough time keeping landscaping that close to the ocean alive. And it's really quite difficult, even on Palmetto, where we've come down to, we just can't do the trees. We can't find trees that'll survive in this environment. And I just see that it would be a problem with the green option. And I went with the enhanced walkway option with, something that I think would be more practical for out there. The other thing is, in the two options that we just discussed for, the Plaza Park and the expansion of the beach, I just wanted to mention, and I did support the Plaza Park walkway option. I really, really feel that in order for any of that to be successful, it has to be, even in the park, not the sand, but it has to be elevated. It really does have to be elevated in order to provide the adequate protection for the neighborhood. I think if the way it is now, it's at the entire neighborhood and all of us are such at risk of flooding, and it happens every winter. but without the elevation of the sand, either way, in front of whatever that structure turns out to be, whether it's a big seawall, I think that it needs to be the same as the north end. Whatever it is at the north end has to be brought all the way down and match it all the way to Clarendon. And we really do need to put a lot of sand in front of that. So that's my only comment. And that's what I feel is needed to protect the neighborhood from flooding at our end. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Robin. I think you picked on a lot of concerns and thoughts that need to go in as we move forward with the viability of each of these options. Particularly with the seawall height and what does that height need to be, and that's what we're hoping to convey with showing these two different kind of situations where if the seawall height can be similar to where it's at, and then what will happen if it does have to be elevated, and that's the preferred alternative. So there will be some space and elevational gain that you'll need to accomplish between the existing paved surface for the road and that promenade.
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, Robin. Okay, next up is Kurt.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yes. Thank you. I like the presentation. My question is twofold. Can Beach Boulevard and the eastern sidewalk that is part of making it work be elevated at least several feet, particularly in the lower area where it's currently significantly lower, so that Beach Boulevard is still able to allow drivers and people on that sidewalk to still see over the new elevated seawall. I saw examples where you had the built-up seawall and the esplanade was elevated with ramps, to get up to the esplanade. Is it possible to make the roadway itself also elevated? Now, there's a technical answer, and then, of course, an aesthetic, and being respectful of the frontage houses. But that's my question. The second smaller one is: does the city own any additional width of the street? Often, what the city owns is a little wider than where it's physically built. Could the street and sidewalk, yes, it would be encroaching a bit, but if it was on city-owned property, could it be moved a couple feet eastward? Two questions, both technical. Thank you.
Yeah, Lucas, I can jump in here if you want. Those are good questions. I think when looking at the South Promenade, the South Park area, as we're calling it, when you're in that park, you can't necessarily see the ocean or over the current seawall in there, and you definitely can't see it very well from the road. And this project's not necessarily looking at lowering that area, so we don't believe that getting that view from the road would be possible without extremely elevating the road, and we don't see that as a possibility at this juncture. With regards to the extent of the city's right of way, it's something we'll have to look into to see how much easterly space there is. But oftentimes that extra space beyond the sidewalk is needed for different utilities, whether it be water or gas connections to the home. So oftentimes there's a reason why that buffer exists, and oftentimes it needs to be there.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, Cindy, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm wondering if we can go back. I think it was around slides 39 through 41. I might be wrong, but we're talking about what amenities are important, parking, the walkway, or a green corridor. But those slides showed a cement wall that seemed taller than certainly myself. And that was all gone over very, very quickly. There were comments about the increased height, but I think that's really important for people to be able to see and visualize. And I don't know if we can go back and look at that and have more conversation about what that actually is creating for the area, or if somebody can talk about how high that area is being talked about now, which if we have a cement wall at the end of every street and we're trying to create a walkable environment from Palmetto with visibility to the ocean, it looks like that's being removed. Thanks.
Yeah, I can answer that. So what you're looking at the section B, I believe, where there's a that elevated proposed seawall, if we're going with that option, is extended past that upper promenade. And why we're showing it that way was that promenade, or that seawall, would act as a parapet wall. You'd either need to have that seawall extended up, 42 inches for a protection, or you would need to have some type of railing system like is currently out there. It also, by having that, so if you kind of zoom in on that slide, and by allowing that seawall for the protection purposes being elevated a little bit higher and provide the safety for that walk surface for the barrier, it allows that upper promenade to be a little bit lower in relationship to that street elevation. So you're kind of doing a stepping up effect instead of having a larger wall in front of the cars that might seem a little bit kind of invasive, and then having a railing on top of that wall.
And just to add on that, I mean, these renderings are just to kind of get a sense of possibilities and what could go on out there. And so this isn't, set in stone, so to speak. And so there's more thought that needs to be put in here, and it really depends on how high the ultimate protection that needs to be put in place here. And once that's set in stone, there'll be more discussion on how to deal with possible elevation changes.
And also, yes, to Ryan's point too, these are showing kind of massings of massing vertical and horizontal. So that large slab of concrete for a wall, that's just to show that element. It's not to show what that element would potentially look like through the design.
Great, thank you both. All right, Christine, you're next.
To Cindy's point, as we're still looking at.
Oh, you're a little far away again, Christine. Sorry.
To Cindy's point, if you're still looking at that drawing, though, if you're driving down Palmetto, what you're seeing is solid structure. So from the cars or from pedestrians walking to get to Beach Boulevard, until they're up on that upper platform, they really wouldn't be able to see the ocean, down that length.
That's correct.
That's the concern that she's raising. That is a visibility issue. That's part of the general plan of what is important, about maintaining in that area for public access and enjoyment. The other question I wanted to ask, so it looked like, at least in your option without the plaza of bringing the beach in, that you're pulling the seawall in. I'm a little confused because I thought budget-wise we were just looking at replacing the seawall on the north end of the pier, and that the lower end still had quite a bit of life to it. So maybe you're looking at long-term plans and this is the second phase. I just wanted some clarification of that. And then to tie in with Robin, both of those plans still had openings in the seawall at Clarendon, which is where the Public Works right now has a huge mound of sand to keep the water from the ocean from going into that area and those homes that are below sea level. So I don't see that addressed in your in either of those options. And then thirdly, besides plants not surviving, right now there's a ton of sand movement in there that Public Works is constantly scraping back off of the paths. And it basically kills everything in the park. It moves concrete furniture that's sitting in there now. So whatever is the plan needs to address the sand management. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. And Lucas, would you mind kind of recapping? There are 3 good questions in there, and I was able to hear Christine, but I think if you can kind of recap the question when answering, that might help.
Well, I think maybe, Ryan can answer, or someone, from the engineering side regarding the southern wall. It was a little bit hard to hear. The first question, I believe, was down by the southern park, that wall, she believed was outside of the original scope of kind of redoing that wall as an option. Maybe Ryan, can you hit that one?
Yeah, sure. So the scope of this project right now, as it sits in phase 1, we are assessing the entire span of Beach Boulevard protection. So that's both of the north and south seawall, including the pier wall, and we are assessing the south gap. And that was the second question, was along the lines of the rendering not showing protection for the south gap. And I think the best way to think about this part of the presentation is to kind of to disengage a little bit from what is on the westerly side, on the ocean side there, and more of think about it in terms of promenade. So just because there wasn't protection shown in that rendering, that is definitely being considered in this project, and certainly in this phase. I'm spacing on the third one. Oh, is the planting, and Lucas, maybe you can touch on it, because that is important in this area. It is difficult to have plants survive.
Yeah, in terms with the maintenance as well. That is a looking at what's kind of there and trying to grow currently. It is a concern, and it would be, that's why the focus would be on moving away from any kind of ornamental planting, focusing on kind of a coastal strand community planting, natives, dune grasses, and plants that are adapted to handle this kind of harsher wind and coastal environment. And most of those options, and kind of go into one of the first follow-up comments regarding that the wall elevation and the difference between the existing street elevation, is that with that elevated area, it does provide some protection from the force of the wind by having the wall there. The planting areas where a lot of them are lower set, more on the street side, so they have some shelter. But that would be a driving force when determining what type of plants can survive out there under the site conditions. And then to follow up on that street level view, if we are, if the end result is to do the seawall and do a new seawall and have to elevate that to provide the safety and protection against that wave overtopping, then that will be a reality, that street will be lower than that elevated seawall. So it very well could be a condition where if you're walking along the street on the inside, not up on that promenade, you could have some elevation blocking your view out to the ocean.
Great, thank you both. Okay, I'm going to take all of the hands raised that are remaining, and then we'll move into public comment. So, Summer, I think you're up next.
Hi, thank you. I'm still just really confused about timelines, because when I hear resiliency, I hear like a long-term plan. And I hear talking about understanding that sea level rise isn't going away. But then I was taken by, I think it was City Manager Woodhouse's comment that, well, we're really looking to solve this problem now. And yet a lot of solving the problem now kind of like starts a bunch of dominoes for costs. And so when I start looking at landscaping and putting, building apparently this tall wall, I want to know, well, how long will those last? Because if the landscaping is money put in now, but it will have to be removed eventually to take care of the sewage infrastructure that needs to be moved, I just feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. And I also was, I feel like last workshop, we talked about an alternative of natural living shorelines. And I'm just wondering why that wasn't presented as an alternative to just that the engineers even looked at. And so we could understand the pros and cons of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer.
Hi, sorry, I'll jump in. So I think the question about timing of, landscaping going in behind a wall, or, even if it is a wall, that's just one of the alternatives we're looking at. So it may not be a wall, but we're in the very preliminary stages of looking at, kind of two different things. We're looking at shoreline protection as one thing, and then we're looking at the, the landscaping and the beautification of the area as another thing. And those two are going to combine once we've selected an option. So we're not quite there just yet, but we do need to start the ball rolling and get community feedback on the landscaping and the beautification. Hopefully that answers the question. And then I will pass on to Brian, who can talk about the living shoreline.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So we talked about living shoreline some at the last public meeting. And as Jillian mentioned, we're looking to incorporate living elements into all the options, though not necessarily. So we're kind of looking at the different viability of different types of living shorelines. The ones that really make the most sense here is like the kind of the coastal strand type community. So again, like this vegetation element, can it go behind the wall? Can it be protected by from the wave forces and kind of bring in this vegetation community behind the wall, or at the viability of a kind of a dune system in front of? And we're kind of thinking that that's not going to be very viable and be a high maintenance thing, but it's still, I think, being considered as part of or like a feature to the beach nourishment option being considered.
Thank you, Paul and Brian. Okay, Alan, you're up next.
Okay, hello everyone. I don't know whether this is a question or a suggestion. A little background first. I have lived on the ocean side of Shoreview Avenue for the past 20 years. The group of people that live in these 13 houses were hoping to get permission to add rocks to our revetment, which is privately financed, by the way, but the Coastal Commission denied the request. A few months ago, we hired some heavy equipment operators to mine the rock that had moved towards the ocean and has been covered by the sand. This is a natural result of the movement of sand by the waves combined with the force of gravity. I was surprised that they found 5 or so 8-ton boulders that were 4 or 5 feet below the surface of the beach in front of my house alone. They moved those rocks onto the existing revetment. My question, or maybe it is a suggestion, is why has the city not done rock mining along both the north and south walls? It is quite apparent that the rocks on the south wall are not contributing any protection whatsoever to the promenade. There are most likely many large boulders that could be brought to the surface to break the waves. This is not a permanent solution to our issues, but it is almost free, does not require new rocks, and can be completed in a relatively short period of time. Comments?
Hey, Alan. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That is something that the city has done periodically. I do believe the last time it was done, I want to say it was around 2016 or 2015. I was new to the city, but I do remember it occurring, and I do know that it has happened in the past and is something looked at to continue providing protection. However, it won't solve any overtopping issues or sea level rise future issues as well. So just keeping that in mind as well. Sorry,
I'll just jump in. And Jillian, if you could jump in and talk about how rock revetments work, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure, Paul. It's just very briefly, you know, how we design the actual revetment is not just the gravity size of the rock, say an 8-ton rock. It's got a lot to do with the number of layers and then the interlock as well. It's a lot to do with how they actually fit together and hold together, which is why we see the differences between an unengineered rock revetment and an engineered rock revetment. If you kind of go back to those renderings that we showed with that very imposing rock wall, that's the level of defense. It's when you actually combine them together, lock them together with a toe section, with a slope, and then a crest as well. So although you're always putting, you know, large rocks on the beach, that does provide some attenuation. What it doesn't do, that's why they move. You know, you think to yourself, how on earth are the waves moving this 8-ton rock? Well, the truth is they do. They move as the sediment moves, as you noted, sir, all the way along. So when we look at solutions with a rock revetment, it has to be on a much larger scale when they all interact and work together.
Thanks, Jillian. All right, Jeff, you're up next. Jeff, are you there?
There we go.
There we go.
Hi. I believe that Ryan addressed this, but I wasn't sure if he did. There was originally talk about closing the gap between the current seawall and the berm at Clarendon. I know that is one of the elements of the LCP and is expected to be done. Is that part of this project or not?
Jeff, yeah, thanks for the question. That is correct. It is part of this project. So we are assessing the gap and the vulnerabilities of that gap and looking at solutions to put in place there.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks, Ryan. Okay, Cliff Lawrence. Hey there, Cliff. Are you on mute still? Can you hear us? There you go. There you go.
I'm often asked why you don't have a wall that looks something more like what Aptus has, that has a curve back out toward the ocean direction. It would seem it's throwing the force back out. That's one question. The other is, while we're doing all this work in the Boulevard, how much work would we be doing to re-encase the infrastructure that's there to prevent, keep it intact?
Yeah, Cliff. I'm sure GHG can touch on your first question for you, but with regards to the infrastructure, at this juncture, we don't know what that type of work may include, or if there would be any work to capture, as you said, the existing infrastructure.
Yeah, and I can touch on quickly the recurved wall, which is what we like to call what you're talking about there, Cliff. Recurved walls are a phenomenon we see on a lot of sea walls, which effectively, like you said, turns the overtopping back. It stops what we see as a phenomenon on a vertical face where you get the wave hit and all the water bursts up in the air, right? And when you have a strong onshore wind, like we, of course, commonly do every day here, then you can get a lot of water that then gets pushed down. The recurve wall stops that. The only limitation to it, unfortunately, is that with the period, the wave period of our waves here, it's not quite as effective. It is much more effective for short period waves, but it is still a way. The size of the recurve is what really affects how effective it is. So for something like ours, we would be looking at a very, very large recurve, but that all comes in the technical feasibility. For a seawall option, that can be incorporated as a capping area. You know what I mean? It's not the main wall. You can also do that with a rock revetment or a beach recharge scheme as well. It can be a secondary wall that has a recurve in it. So it's an effective method.
Thank you both. Okay, quick update. I'm going to take the final questions of those who haven't been able to ask a question yet, and I think we'll wrap up and then move into public comment, which again allows folks to share comments and ask questions at that point, just to keep us moving. And in case we lose anyone at 8 p.m. for their next meeting, we can wrap up. So I think next is Taylor.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for the great presentations. I'd love to just make an observation about with the Beach Boulevard closed, with the damage on the promenade right now near the pier. It's been very interesting to observe the human movement. A lot of the closed roadway has turned into a pedestrian path, and it's, in my view, kind of livened up the space with people, like almost even more people walking. And it feels like finally, like the whole beachfront is designed for humans instead of 210 vehicles. So I would love to see some options about closing all of the streets all the way up to Montecito, and just have the parking lot and the roadway from Clarendon to Montecito open, and then the rest of Beach Boulevard closed for people exclusively. I also think it would be important to take a step back and think about how is Pacifica managing traffic and cars, and how that can integrate with enhanced public transportation, both like to and from BART, for folks that are coming from really far away, like East Bay, on the very busy days, all the way to like a more localized transit for Pacificans, where people could come to Sharp Park very easily without having a big hassle on with slow public transit. So just two comments that would affect the landscape.
Thanks, Taylor.
I think, Ryan and I have talked about this before, but part of the problem with shutting down that street is the access to the parking, to the driveways for the houses along that front Beach Boulevard. As you get down further south, I'm not sure if you have as many cars going from Montecito down to Carlton, if there's residents that need parking along there. Is that the case, Ryan, or is that something that maybe as a temporary or as a solution for maintaining traffic out of those areas?
Yeah. Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, there's definitely access that needs to be provided there to the homes there. So I don't believe that is being considered as part of this project at this time.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take two more questions and focus, if they are focused on the public space opportunities, and then we'll move into, I'll recap next steps briefly, and then we'll move into public comment. So our last year, Kathleen and S. Thompson Drake. So Kathleen, you're up next.
Thank you, and thanks for this presentation. This is great. I think that I have a question. It just seems to me that we have some critical trade-offs in front of us. And for example, if our goal is safety above all else, then of course we would have to accept a higher wall, it seems to me. And further to your answer above on my other question, keeping the promenade accessible is also critical. So I just feel like I don't know how we would be accepting anything that was anything less than the most safe option and the most accessible option. Is there another option that is safe? Is there another option other than the a higher wall, the beach wall?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Kathleen. Yeah, Jillian covered it really well, that all of their options that the team is assessing really need to be compared apples to apples. So they need to provide the same level of protection, and they all do. We all still want them to provide accessibility as well. So we are looking at more than one option. And I hope that kind of answers your question. We're looking at making sure there is accessibility and that the level of protection for all the alternatives are similar.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I can maybe just add to that, Ryan, just on the technical side as well. You know, crest height is not the only metric that changes things. Crest width and crest type also matters, whether we're talking about a revetment or a wall. So it's all about how the water then travels, or the overtopping then travels through the wave, through the run-up, and then over. So it's not just a simple metric of go high. You know, when we talk about how we use the space, how we set back, what gets the intermediate areas, we talked about what happens behind the wall. There's a lot of that goes into it. It's not just simply what goes high. But the important thing is that we do fairly compare, and then that also, of course, gets covered in the cost. How big, how wide, etc.
Thanks, Jillian. Okay, we're going to take the last question here from S. Thompson Drake.
Hi, this is Suzanne.
Hi, Susie.
And thank you again for such a dynamite presentation. I think the renderings are very clear and are definitely getting all the creative juices going. So thanks for all your hard work. When we talk about raising the elevation of the seawall, somebody had brought up if you're driving, or would your views be blocked, or even just walking. Now, currently, right now, we have like these handrails that are basically the barrier between the seawall and the water, if you will. Are those still considered in this, or is it like a concrete wall that goes all the way up? Or I might have missed it. You might have covered it and I might have missed it. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that would look?
Sure. Yeah. So I hate to lead with this answer, but we're not quite there yet. So once we understand what the preferred alternative for protection is and what the height is, then we can try to start dealing with how to deal with grade changes if they're there. So I mean, there's a possibility that you could keep the railings similar to the way that they are right now, or there's a possibility that there is more of a straight concrete wall to deal with part of that grade change to provide more protection. I'm sure Lucas can chime in on some of those trade-offs, but it's going to be important as we move forward to think about those on how to best accommodate those changes.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you kind of nailed it there. And you could kind of look at those two cross sections as two different options regarding if the seawall is raised or not. In option A, I kind of showed it where it was. And you would have a railing protection on the, on the top of that seawall. In the lower section, section B was showing, well, what if that sea level was raised? Again, going to Ryan's point, we're not there yet. We don't know if that's the solution going forward. But if that was the option, we wanted to show what that condition could look like. And that was hopefully a little bit more captured in section B, where you do see the kind of stepping up effect in using that seawall as kind of in place of that railing to provide the protection between the walkway and the ocean for that drop. And then you could create that stepping down. So what we didn't want to show was this giant wall just immediately adjacent to the travel way. We wanted to, step that up and break that elevation change up if that ends up being the need.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of the great questions, and thanks to the team for answering many of those. I'll share the reminder, two reminders that if you submitted a question in the Q&A pod and it was not answered, it will be captured and responded to in the meeting summary. There are also a few responses of, well, we'll follow up with more information, so that it'll be captured in the workshop summary. And I'll also note if there are additional questions that you'd like to ask or feedback, to please feel free to share that in the workshop worksheet. So Matt, do you mind going to our next step slide? And I'll recap this before we move into public comment. Okay, so encourage everyone to please visit the project website. All of the meeting materials, including the recordings and the summaries from the past 2 workshops, and what will be from this workshop will be uploaded in the document library. So that's the place to go for more information. We encourage you, again, to complete the worksheet and the /post-meeting survey, and that will be up on the website 2 weeks from today, February 18th. But of course, feel free to reach out to the team with any questions. And the next community workshop will take place, thinking March, April timeframe, and we'll focus on the final project alternative and some other project updates. Ryan, anything to add or emphasize or clarify here?
No, you hit them. I just wanted to apologize if we didn't get to your question in the Q&A. It's a bit difficult to listen to it all live and take those in and try to stay engaged there while also answering those. So we're going to get answers to those in the workshop summary. We're not trying to ignore those questions, and we think there's definitely value to them. And we really encourage you guys to use the worksheet that we're providing online to give us some more feedback. And of course, there's always the public comment box on the project webpage that you can drop your comments in or email me for questions.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm seeing hands raised for public comment. A quick reminder on how that will work. Similar to the Q&A we were just doing, I'll kind of give heads up when it's close to your turn in the queue, and then we'll unmute your line. And once we can hear you, we'll start the clock for 2 minutes. And then Matt will be taking some notes of what you're sharing on the screen, so we get that as well. Okay, so feel free to raise your hand if you're ready to go. Let me do one quick look. I don't think we have anyone just on the line. But if you get disconnected and you still want to provide public comment, it's *9 if you're dialed in separately, just in case. Okay. So the first couple I see are Remy, Christine, and then Jim and Pat Creamer. So Remy, we're gonna start here.
Hi, I have a concern because I'm not clear on what the city's budget is for this entire project. And I think the budget really informs which one of these alternatives that we end up doing. And I didn't see an alternative to basically just repair the existing seawall to extend its current 35-year life to its original 75-year life, and just extend the top of it as just on as needed basis, to bring it up to the 30-foot sea protection level. So it's really hard to figure out which one of these alternatives without, again, the budget. And I've also noticed, I think there was some damage on the pier, and is that a completely separate project and separate budget to this seawall? So that's kind of the two major questions. And the third minor one would be about the transitions between the different sections that were shown. As you have, railing, and how does that railing transition to the parapet, as the street is and the sidewalk is changing elevation. So that wasn't clear. And lastly, I've seen the grass that was planted on the Esplanade Plaza area on the south side, and in half a year, the grass is completely wiped out by overtopping and the waves and the winds. So, I would strongly suggest, we're going to do anything there is probably the beach extension. If there's a budget to move the wall. Otherwise, a dune solution is probably more appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Remy. Okay. Yes, Ryan?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there and say, because this is more of a public comment section, we'll go ahead and treat some of these comments that end up as questions, similarly to how we were treating some of the questions we weren't able to get to. And touch upon them. And so we're hearing you, and this is all going to be captured, and there will be answers to them. But in the interest of time, going on 2 hours and 15 minutes now, we're going to move forward with commenting.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Yes, and good reminder, maybe get up and move around, make sure you have a water in front of you. I see 8 hands up, and so raise your hand if you have a public comment, and we'll move through these. So next up is Christine.
Hi again, thanks for letting me.
Okay, sorry, my usual reminder to speak up if you can, or get closer to the microphone.
Yeah, no, this computer is not got a good sound. So just a couple of technical questions for the consultant. So I spent some time this week reading a report from 2016, the San Francisco Littoral Cell Coastal Regional Sediment Plan draft that was put together, I believe, by the Army Corps of Engineers. And a couple of comments. In its conclusion, it says that there are significant data gaps that hamper future shore conditions and adaptation planning. In particular, sediment transport in Pacifica and Daly City has not been studied in sufficient detail. So my question for you is there information missing that you need to properly evaluate these options for resiliency for Beach Boulevard? And if you feel like you have this information, that it's been gathered since 2016, can you please share that with the public? We have some oceanographers and detail. Secondly, I understand that coastal armoring, revetments, and sea walls protect the backshore right behind these improvements, but don't prevent loss of sand and beach narrowing. Has modeling been done that shows the impacts of these various options to the Sharp Bark Beach, but also to areas of Pacifica further away? There was a comment from the Shoreview neighborhood. I was walking that neighborhood last week, and right north of this area. And so there are implications to loss of sand and shore that potentially damaging their property needs to be assessed for these decisions. And then thirdly, I haven't heard anything about environmental review. So is that required, once you have a project design in mind? I know this is replacement of the seawall, and maybe that's not required, but the truth is you're changing the shape and the form and the footings, and there might be other environmental consequences. So I would expect to see that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christine. I'm gonna lower your hand. Sorry, one question. Let me just repeat and make sure I got that. It was kind of going a little more in and out. I think the first question was that you were looking at the San Francisco Littoral Sand Management Plan. And I know it's a long name, so we'll make sure to get the full name. And that it looks like there are significant gaps about sediment transport, and it did mention Pacifica. So the question was, is there information missing to analyze that? And if the city does have that information, if the team does have that information, could that information be shared? And then the next one was, that revetments and seawall doesn't necessarily prevent loss of sand or beach narrowing. Is there modeling to look at that for Sharp Park and then other areas of Pacifica? We can follow it to make sure we're getting this right, but I want to just recap to those also listening on the phone, and then for asking about if environmental review is needed. Thank you. Sorry, Christine. I just feel bad you're going in and out with the audio there. Okay. All right, Jim, you're up next. Jim Creamer.
Actually, it's not Jim, it's Pat this time.
Oh man, sorry.
And mine is a question that I didn't see fitting in any of the sections of the presentation. It's a practical and straightforward question. We all know that periodically we have a very energetic and active shoreline here in Pacifica. And what I'd like to see is some examples, some real evidence of places that seawalls such as the ones being proposed for here have been sustainable in kind of a long-term sense with reasonable cost, either in California or any place that has a similar sort of energetic shoreline as ours is.
Thanks, Pat. All right. The next couple, or the next few that I see are Kurt, Stephanie, and Robin. So Kurt.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to compliment everybody on their work and presentation, and we're all trying to think outside the box. The thing that I was trying to have addressed earlier about elevating the street and the eastern sidewalk to match the elevated potential promenade was directed really about the north esplanade, not the south esplanade, which I understand is different. And I want people to imagine that we're going to maybe get rid of street parking, but we're still going to allow a street both for access to those driveways, but also for people to slowly drive along Beach Boulevard and to see the ocean, and that it's actually Beach Boulevard. And therefore, the ramping that was described in sections A and B would actually occur for both the sidewalk and the street in the westernmost sections of the various cross streets, and that the entire Beach Boulevard would be elevated several feet to go along with where the new beach wall is. This might not be practical, it might be too expensive, but it should be considered because Beach Boulevard is part of our scenic boulevard of Pacifica. Thanks.
Thanks, Kurt. All right, next up is Stephanie.
Hi, this is Stephanie, and I live in West Sharp Park. I'd love to see more outreach to the neighbors right on Beach Boulevard to get them involved in this process and what it would look like as it is right outside of our front doors, basically. And also, I'd love to understand better the timeline. I feel like every year it's getting worse along the coast, and we keep having to put a lot of money as a city into these temporary fixes. And my understanding generally is, you're making temporary fixes, and I'd rather see a more comprehensive approach that would probably cost less over time than needing to, I don't want to use the word armor, but needing to fix things every year, every 2 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, Robin, you're up next. Hey there, Robin.
Thank you. Hi, here I am. I agree with the comments from the last speaker, Stephanie, that the neighbors really do need to be asked, and specifically that and about the height of the wall. I feel that if I lived on Beach Boulevard, I live behind it, that I would gladly give up 8 to 10 feet of my view if it meant preserving my property, my neighbors, but everybody behind me all the way to Highway 1. I believe my vision is that we have a promenade now. We would have a real seawall that is a promenade again. And you would combine those with some natural features and the engineering needed to protect the neighborhood. And I think that we would have something that still provides the access that we need to the beach, to Maury Point for visitors, for the handicapped, but also be an attraction unto itself. I see there are amazing structures that are on waterways that are engineered, but they're also things of beauty. Things that are done with so many natural elements to them that you can hardly tell that some of them, that they're even man-made. but they provide safety and protection, especially the beaches, like I referenced earlier in Holland. I think that the safest option for us is to go with a seawall. That's what we need to go all the way down, including closing the gap down at the end of Clarendon. And basically, I'm hoping that that if we combine those elements, you can do something that'll provide us with at least a 50-year life expectancy for the wall, not 10 years. Why would we go through all of this and the money and the expense and build something that big? Like people have said, well, they just have to take it out later. But why do that? It needs to be a 50-year projected protection for the area. And this to ensure the future of us, all development, but all the way to Highway 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. All right, Tom Thompson. So I'll do a quick readout, actually. So the next few that are up on the list, we have Tom Thompson, Margaret, and Peter. So Tom, you're up next.
There we go. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Tom Thompson. I've been a Sharp Park taxpayer and property owner for over 30 years. Our core issue in the Beach Boulevard infrastructure resilience is installing a modern seawall. The cost of inaction would be hundreds of times more expensive. Consider a partial list. Hundreds of millions of dollars in public infrastructure, electric service, natural gas service, water service, sewer service, cable, communications, internet, storm drains, a critical sewer pumping station, council chambers, access to coastal trails, picnic areas, beach, promenade, a golf course, all right on a seawall. The safety and vitality and economics of building a modern seawall is such that it's a no-brainer. Also consider around 1,000 existing homes, over 100 small businesses, mostly mom and pops, the future hotel that represents Pacifica's ability to survive financially as a city, and establishing a walkable and sustainable Sharp Park downtown district for Pacifica, also all right on a seawall. So I urge Pacificans and our city council to work together to make a modern seawall along Beach Boulevard happen in a timely manner. It's not an exaggeration to say the future of Pacifica rides on a modern seawall along Beach Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, Margaret, you'll be up next. Let me lower the hand. All right, Margaret, you're up. Margaret, are you there? I think you're able to unmute.
Oh.
There we go.
I've become aware of a study by the Army Corps of Engineers, ACE, in partnership with the city of Pacifica, stating that the cost benefit of doing a $10 million seawall project does not justify the investment. Hence, no federal funding for that. I did not see this study on the city website. Did the city know of its existence? If so, did the city share it on its website? Where? If not, why not? When I look at the city's first workshop on Sharp Park, while the city mentions that the major reason for the wall was to protect the wastewater system, the notes from the meeting implied that a lot more time was spent discussing the side benefits of the wall, that is, protection for the homes along Beach Boulevard, and with a wall, the strong possibility of a boutique hotel. So now we have a situation where the city has spent at least 5 years exploring the possibilities for funding a wall. The ACE has recently told the city that the feds could better use their money in other coastal areas in more immediate danger than Pacifica's. During these 5 years, has the city started planning for the renovation of the beach infrastructure? On the chance that funding could dry up, is there anything on paper to show that the city is working to not only protect Beach Boulevard, but the majority of citizens east of Palmetto, who will end up with backed up sewers if this problem isn't addressed? How about protecting the pump station? Remember, the purpose for the wall is to protect the sewer system. While some type of sea protection might be a good short temporary solution, the sewer system is much more important to a greater number of people than the wall. Pacificans, it's all about available money. Always has been. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing 4 more hands raised. And the next few are Peter, Taylor, and I think it's Suzanne Thompson Drake. So Peter.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes.
2 points. One, it seems to me that the plans for the promenade would literally cement in the infrastructure that this whole project is designed to protect, making it more costly and more difficult to move that infrastructure in the future. I think moving the infrastructure needs to be part of a long-term plan. I understand that the immediate need is to protect what's there now. In that respect, the other point is I agree with Remy Tan that one of the alternatives being considered needs to be an immediate repair or a more limited, rather than building a brand new seawall, getting the job done right away and do a repair that will protect what's there now, and then do long-range planning for moving the infrastructure and but dealing with the immediate need immediately, and then do some long-term planning. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Oops, sorry. Okay, Taylor, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I just want to share my support for having a long-term view of this decision. And I really think the do nothing plan, or the very light touch plan, as Peter was talking about, needs to be considered. It needs to be on the table. It needs to be in the decision matrix. If we had one person share, Tom Thompson shared that it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to take care of moving the infrastructure. Well, I want to see that. I want to see actually how much it costs, because I don't believe it would cost that much. How much does it cost to move the sewage system and the electricity, and finding a pathway for the residents that are living along the coastline, and also what is the financing strategy over 100 years? These kinds of things should be in the decision matrix when we're making decisions in the tens of millions of dollars for seawall resiliency. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so 2 more hands up. I think it's Suzanne Thompson Drake and then Jeff. So Suzanne, you're up.
Hi, this is Suzanne Drake. Thank you for having me again. Couple things. We're also talking about the seawall being this protection for infrastructure, but I think we need to really address the fact that the seawall and the promenade is, in fact, a draw for locals and visitors. That is our attraction. And then its usage to look at all the views. So the seawall and the promenade is absolutely viable for the economic sustainability of this community. If we don't have that, we don't have a growth opportunity for this community. Additionally, we haven't even addressed how much taxpayer money would be gone if, like one of the other speakers had mentioned, kind of moving infrastructure, basically acquiescing to managed retreat. managed retreat is off the table. So we need to move forward with the economic sustainability and viability of this particular town, which is Pacifica. If Pacifica is not shored up with the promenade being the main draw, you have kids on bicycles and people enjoying picnics and so forth that they actually would not have the opportunity on the beach to enjoy. Walking their dogs, people with handicaps and disabilities. Sorry about the word handicap, but their disabilities. People come and enjoy this promenade as the draw for the city of Pacifica. So we need to keep that in mind. Secondarily, you might have already mentioned this, ma'am, but I went to cityofpacifica.org/beach resiliency. Mm-hmm. And I think you had mentioned that there would be there was other recordings on there. I wasn't able to, it wasn't obvious where those were. So maybe you can remind us where those are, please.
Thanks, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great, yes, I might have misspoke on that one last question, Ryan. Do you know, are they under the document library or did I flub?
Yeah, that's correct. So on that main page, there's a button for document library and it takes you to all the documents, including the workshop workshop videos, as well as the workshop summaries.
Thank you. Sorry for being confusing there. Okay, now I see two hands up. So Jeff and Cindy. So Jeff.
Hello, thank you. This is Jeff Guillet. I have heard some people talking about calls for marshes and living reefs. There are some places along the coast where those approaches work, like Lindemar Beach, but this area is much, much too narrow. There's no place for that to come in. And in an area like West Sharp Park, there are really trade-offs that need to be made. And sometimes you just have to put safety and protection first. Maintaining the promenade is an essential point of continuing to provide a safe access for everyone. And that's utmost importance, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. All right, Cindy, last hand up. So kind of, Tony's got his hand, has their hand up now, and Kimberly. So kind of, if you want to get in for public comment, now's the time to do so. Okay, Cindy.
Hi, thank you. I'd also like to support the comment that really more people need to be involved in this process. This is something that's going to impact all of Pacifica. And I appreciate that in West Sharp Park, a postcard was mailed out and, you know, outreach has been tried, but we're still only here, I think, at less than 50 of our community members for a really important project that could have impact for the entire city of Pacifica. And I'm also, it's come up as well about, I think city manager noted that, you know, we know that there's urgency to the situation along Beach Boulevard because of the current storms. But I also think that we need to have a focus on a near-term solution because the projects that we're looking at, which are currently unfunded and are looking at potentially millions and millions of, you know, double-digit or more millions of dollars, isn't something that's going to happen in the near term. And construction is also going to be a considerable amount of time. So I too would like to see some of the options that Taylor brought up and Peter brought up of looking outside of the box of what currently has been looked at. I brought up before potentially having that be a walking street, and I'd really like to see some creative ideas in the next presentation. But thank you for everyone's time so far. I know it's been a lot of work.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, I see Tony and Kimberly. So Tony, you're up next.
Hi, I just want to say that I think I represent the majority of Pacificans in voicing that we are looking forward to seeing a new seawall and preserving the infrastructure there and the promenade. I mean, there'll always be a few dissenting voices, but I think the alternatives that were presented in today's meeting by Jillian and some others look like some practical steps toward an actual solution, and it's encouraging to hear it. So I just wanted those voices to be heard as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, Kimberly Williams, you're up next.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. It was really, really a good one and very informative. I wanted to just bring forward some points that others perhaps didn't raise. The first one is that in regard to Jeff's previous comment, the area that he referred to is narrow because of the impact of armoring over time. So that's something to think about. Number two, I think that we cannot ignore that whatever this is done with this project, it will impact all of the shoreline of Pacifica and beyond. It's not just local to this one spot. So areas like Lindemar Beach will be impacted by what happens here. And then the other thing I'd like to say is that it is important to support businesses in Pacifica. And I noticed that when you mention supporting businesses in Pacifica, you're very selective about which businesses you want to support in Pacifica. Many of the small businesses are dependent on people who enjoy walking on the beach and surfers. And I think that you should also take those businesses into account, including restaurants who depend on visitors who come for that reason. Pacifica is not, it is a beautiful place, but it's becoming less and less beautiful because you're making it more concrete, rock and asphalt. And that does not attract the same kinds of visitors who enjoy the natural beach environment. And that impacts hotel usage as well. So I would ask the City Council to keep that in mind as they decide which businesses they prefer to support and which ones they aren't. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I am not seeing any more hands for public comment. Last call for any public comment, for those who have not been able to provide their 2 minutes. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you for staying. I know we gave the window of when to wrap up the meetings. I appreciate everyone staying longer and appreciate all of the really thoughtful questions and comments shared today. As we recapped that this recording will be made available online, so that might be helpful to reference. And many of the questions that were brought up today will be answered in the workshop summary, which will be circulated at a later date once we get it all pulled together. And then finally, the kind of final plug for the worksheet. Feel free to submit it now if you're ready to submit it now, or feel free to take some time and think through some additional response. And as always, feel free to reach out to Ryan and complete the kind of open-ended comment form on the website with any further questions or comments. So thank you so much, everyone, and hope everyone has a good rest of the evening and a good weekend coming up. Thank you.